Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm going to show you every one of the BR standard locomotives that have been produced for 00 scale. In 1948, the nationalisation of the big four British railway companies took place, and so all of the locomotives from the big four companies were merged into one company. And this meant that British Railways ended up operating countless different steam locomotives, all different shapes and sizes, all using different parts, and all with different maintenance needs. And this was costing British Railways an absolute fortune in terms of maintenance. So in 1951 they decided to do something about it. They introduced their standard range of steam locomotives. These standard locomotives were designed to cater to the needs of the entire network, and they'd all be built in a similar way and to share as many parts as possible to simplify maintenance. And so we ended up with 12 different designs of standard locomotive, ranging from the Class 2, those were the weakest, to the Class 9, which were the strongest. And today I'm going to be talking you through all of those different classes and showing you the various different models that exist of those classes in 00 scale. And we're starting off with this, the BR Standard Class 2, which is the newest model that I'm showing today, and it's part of the reason that I'm able to make this video today, because this is one of the final pieces in the puzzle. So this is produced by Hornby, and it is one of the smallest and weakest of the BR standards. The 2MT was introduced in 1952 to the design of Robert Riddles, and it was based on the IVAT Class 2MT of the LMS. And incidentally, many of the standards were based on LMS designs. These weighed in at just 50 tonnes and 65 were built in total between 1952 and 1956. All examples were withdrawn from service by the end of 1967, but 3 have been preserved. And here's a closer look at the Class 2, and I think I would say this is my favourite of the BR standards. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I do prefer smaller and more elegant locos, but also because this is so similar to the LMS IVAT design, it also has a lot of that LMS elegance left over in it as well. And I think generally speaking, a lot of the BR standard designs didn't look as elegant as the old Big Four designs. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Big Four hiding the mechanisms and all of the pipework and stuff inside the bodies, whereas the BR standards had a lot of this externalized. All the different pipework and lubricators and mechanical components were all exposed, and in some cases that can make the standards look a little bit messy really. But anyway, that's the standard Class 2. Let's get it running. So like most of the standards, the 2MT was a mixed traffic loco, so it would do both goods and passenger work. But here I've got it hauling a bit of a suburban passenger train, which is something the 2MTs were great for because of how lightweight they were, meaning that they were great for branch lines where the larger locos couldn't fit. Yet at the same time they were still a nice modern, efficient design that could do the job just as well, if not better, than the locos they replaced. So there you have it, the standard Class 2. Interestingly, quite a few of the standards with the lower classifications had both a tender and a tank engine version, and there was a tank engine version of the 2MT. Now Bachmann do produce one of these, but unfortunately that is the one that I don't have. But I do have this. This is the LMS 2MT, as designed by IVAT, and apparently this is very similar. So if you're wondering what the Class 2 looks like, well, it's not far from this thing. So with that, let's move on to the standard Class 3, and you're probably familiar with the Bachmann standard Class 3 tank, and that's coming up in a second, but there was also a standard Class 3 tender locomotive, which was a Mogul, like the 2MT was, but a little bit larger. And as far as I know, there is no 3MT tender engine available in 00 gauge. Fingers crossed we'll get one at some point. But obviously the standard 3 tank has been produced, and here it is. So this one is produced by Bachmann. It is quite a few years old now, but it's still a decent looking representation of the class. And the standard Class 3MT tank was also inspired by an IVAT design, this time the IVAT Class 4 from the LMS. 45 of these tank engines were built in the early 1950s, and they ran on 2 outside cylinders, and they had a pleasingly compact looking design. All examples were withdrawn and scrapped between 1964 and 1967, and sadly not one of these was preserved. So here's a closer look at the Class 3 tank, and this is in the second of the only two liveries that you're going to see today, BR Black. And that's because, as well as standardising the locos physically, BR also standardised their locos visually. They went from having all of the colourful liveries of the Big Four with all of the variations to just two liveries during the BR era. You got the BR Green and the BR Black. The only real variation would be whether or not there was lining, and even most of them had lining. So variety in livery is something that really went away with the BR standards. Anyway, let's hook this up to a train and let me show you it running. So I've got this one doing light freight duties, which seems about right for a loco of this size. And apparently the class used a Great Western boiler, or I guess what was by then an ex-Great Western boiler. And a lot of the Class 3 tanks ran on the western region of the network, although I believe those ones were painted into the green. So I'm not an expert, but I would guess that this comes from elsewhere on the network. But there you have it, the Class 3 tank on a nice light freight train. Let's move on then to the standard Class 4, and quite surprisingly there are three different standard Class 4 designs. One of them's a tank engine, but two of them are tender locos. One of them was a 260, a Mogul tender engine, and there is no model of that available as far as I know. The other one was a 460 tender engine, and there was a model produced of that, and that's coming up in just a second. And then we have the tank engine, of course, which was a 264 tank, or a reverse Pacific, and we'll start with that. So here it is. This is another model from Bachmann, and you can see quite immediately that this is quite a serious step up. Once we get to the standard Class 4s, we're dealing with much larger locos. And again, this model has been around for quite a while now. It doesn't have that many features, it's not really that modern, but most people agree that it's still a reasonably accurate interpretation of the Class 4 tank. And it's obviously an important part of the standard collection. So this one was introduced in 1951, and it was based on the Fairburn and Fowler tank engines of the LMS. These would be the largest of the standard tank engines. In fact, it's the final tank engine we're going to see today, and they were fairly numerous, with over 150 being built in total. These were particularly versatile though, hence the larger number built. They were used for a variety of different tasks over the network. Like most standards though, they were withdrawn in the mid-1960s, yet a healthy 15 of them remain under preservation today. So here's a closer look at the Class 4 tank, and I really like this one as well. I think again it's a very nicely proportioned look, probably because of the influence of Fowler and Fairburn. But still, it's a very large and powerful looking tank engine, and you could also argue that this is the ultimate development in British Railways tank engines, because it was the largest of the standards. So I think with that, we'll put it with a suitably sized train and see how it gets on. So I think the obvious choice for this one would have been passenger coaches. So I've thought outside the box and coupled it up to some sort of flat wagons. Maybe it's going to pick up its load. And I'm going to try and be as varied as possible with the trains in today's video. So I'm going to try not to duplicate any trains ever. I'm going to try and make sure they're all completely different. So there you have it, the standard 4 tank engine. Not a dreadfully powerful loco from Bachmann here, but with lightish wagons like this, as you can see, it's okay. Alright, very nice. Class 4 tank. As for the standard Class 4 tender engines, I'm pretty sure that the Mogul version hasn't been produced in 00 scale, but the 460 version has, and actually you've got a choice because both Hornby and Bachmann have produced this one. But I'm going with this one, the Hornby one, because this one is slightly more modern and I think it's got a bit more detail to it as well. A beautiful model, as you can see, and although it's supposed to be very similar in design to the standard Class 4 tank, to my eyes at least it looks completely different. But in terms of design, it's supposed to be almost identical to the 4MT tank, except of course it's got a tender. 80 of these were built between 1951 and 1957, and they were used for many heavier duties where the standard Class 5 was too large and heavy to be used. They generally served in the London Midland and also the Western region. These survived until quite late, with the final withdrawal not taking place until 1968. Though most of the class are now scrapped, 6 do remain under preservation. So there it is up close for you, and yeah, this is a fine model, but it's not one that really excites me that much. I guess it's a bit nondescript looking, it's quite similar to the Class 5 that we're about to see, and yet it is the Class 5 that most people know better, really. But yeah, like I say, it's a decent model, it's relatively modern from Hornby, so it's got lots of detail on it, loads of separate parts. Generally speaking, it's a great representation of the standard Class 4. So let's get this one up and running. So for this, I've gone with a bit of a larger passenger train. I've got blood and custard coaches. And now that we get into the slightly higher power classifications, these are the locos that you'd start to see doing the larger passenger services and probably even some express bits and bobs. So slightly larger train, trying to match the trains to the locos. And I think the BR green livery of the loco really does lend itself to passenger work. So there you have it, the Class 4 tender version, made by Hornby this time. Moving on then to the standard Class 5, and there is no standard Class 5 tank engine, so we'll move straight on to the tender engine, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with. So here it is, looking very familiar, as I say, because it's based on the incredibly famous Black 5 from the LMS. But this is the standard Class 5 from Bachmann, looking quite businesslike in the BR Black livery. And while it does look very similar to the standard Class 4 tender engine, it is just slightly larger and in real life slightly heavier as well, which gave it that slight edge in terms of power. The standard Class 5 was also introduced in '51, and this time, like I say, it was based on the Black 5 as designed by William Stanier, only with a few superficial modifications really. They had a higher running plate and a self-cleaning smoke box which simplified maintenance. 172 of these were built in total, but withdrawal took place quite early with these, and all but 5 had been scrapped by 1957. So here's a closer look at the Class 5, and yeah, everybody knows this one because it is so similar to the famous Black 5. But it does beg the question, which one do people prefer? I think for me it has to be the Black 5. I'm not as keen on the standard. I think mainly because of the kind of messy pipe work and all of the extra complexity on this, it kind of loses a bit of the elegance and almost simplicity on the outside that the LMS Black 5 had. But I know that at least some people will prefer this because obviously it's more modern, slightly more powerful, and maybe a little bit more business-like. But yeah, if you've got a preference, do pop it down in the comments. For now though, let's get the standard 5 running and see what this one can do. So here it goes with some vans. And for many years I could not have done this video with this loco because it was dead, the motor failed, and it just sat on my shelf for the longest time. However, a year or two ago now, I designed a new motor bracket for it and fitted a coreless motor, which means for the first time in quite some years, I'm actually able to run this, and obviously it's an important part of this video. So the standard 5 up and running again with some vans, looking pretty good. And it's a speedy loco now as well, so I've got it running at about 30 speed here, and as you can see, it's still going pretty fast. So now we're moving on to the standard Class 6, and this is where things start to look a lot different. We're leaving the smaller wheel configurations behind, and the next few locos are going to be Pacifics, so 462s. And this is the first one, the standard Class 6 or the Clan class. And this is the Hornby model of the Clan, which I believe is based on the Hornby Britannia, and up until recently these were quite rare until Hornby did another batch of them, and that's when I was able to get this. So this is Clan MacDonald, and here's a little bit of background on the Clans. So there was only a small number of these built, just 10 of them in total, and they're very similar in design to the Class 7, which we're about to see. But these featured a smaller boiler and a few other weight-saving measures at the cost of some power in order to improve its route availability. That said, many other parts were shared between the two classes, which made maintenance nice and simple. The withdrawal of the Clans was complete by 1966, and this time all of them were scrapped with 0 survivors. So there you have it, there's a closer look at the Clan, and this is one that's really not talked about very often. I suppose that's mainly because it's not really a part of the preservation scene, so if you want to see a Clan class, you've got to look at photos, or you've got to look at these models, which is obviously what I prefer to do. I suppose another reason why this might get overlooked is because it's very similar looking to the Britannia, which obviously does have quite a few preserved examples, so most people are going to be more familiar with that. But yeah, I think this is a decent model, lots of detail on it, and it's so great because of course it gives us an idea of what the real locos would have been like. So there you have it, the Clan class. Let's hook this up, I think, to some passenger coaches, and let's see how it gets on. And in the name of keeping every train different and not repeating myself, I've got the Clan hauling a mixed train. So we've got passenger coaches at the front and some freight at the back, tankers and such. Now obviously in real life mixed trains were a thing, but I'm not really sure how realistic this would be for a Clan class. But hey, I'm running out of ideas, so to keep every train different, we've got the Clan with a mixed train. So there you have it, Clan class, good runner from Hornby this one. And it does look decent no matter what you couple it up to. So that's it, the Class 6. Moving on then to the standard Class 7, which is essentially almost the same thing as the standard Class 6. It's just a little bit larger in a few areas. So here it is, this is the Hornby Britannia class, Britannia being the other name for the standard Class 7. And essentially, yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It's got a slightly larger boiler, but even looking at the two next to each other, there's really not a lot of difference. I think if I couldn't see the number on the side, I'd struggle to tell them apart really in isolation. The Britannias were more numerous than the Clans though, with 55 of these built in total. I guess that's mainly because they were just more useful due to that extra power. The design of this also drew from successful steam locomotives of years gone by, including a very similar firebox and boiler as seen on the Merchant Navy class of the Southern Railway. By 1968 though, all of the Class 7 had been withdrawn, with only 2 of these preserved. So here she is, Anzac up close for you, and yeah, as a Class 7, a Britannia, this will be much more familiar. And actually I've even had the privilege of seeing one of these. I'm sure it was at the Great Central Railway quite a few years ago now. Can't remember whether I saw it in steam, but I know I certainly saw a Britannia. So even for me, this is a familiar sight. Like I say, quite similar to the Class 6, but slightly larger, and yeah, you might be able to notice that the boiler and firebox are a little bit chunkier, but otherwise, yeah, pretty much the same thing. But obviously British Railways chose to classify them separately. Okay, well, let's get this thing running. So the Britannias were mixed traffic locomotives, although I'd probably be more inclined to put them on a bit of a passenger train, but I haven't run my big rake of open wagons yet, so I've decided she can have these. And as you can see, she is making mincemeat of these open wagons. In fact, I've just had to slow her down a little bit because she was going a bit too fast for them. But there you go, the Britannia, I think one of the most iconic looking of the BR standards really. Not at all like any of the big 4 locos that came before it. You can look at it and tell quite easily that this was a British Railways design. So that's it, the standard Class 7. Now then, let's move on to the standard Class 8, and this was actually the smallest of the standard classes because there was only ever one built. And you might think it's very unlikely that a model of this would ever be produced, and I think everybody thought that until about 5 to 10 years ago, Hornby came along with a new tooled version of it. So here it is, the standard Class 8, Duke of Gloucester, that was its name, and it was the only Class 8 ever built. Looks quite similar to the Britannia, as you can see, but it is quite a bit larger and chunkier looking. And this was built a little bit later than the others in 1954, and it came about to replace a ruined Princess Royal class that was involved in an accident. However, it was considered a failure due to poor steaming and excessive fuel consumption, and as a result, no further examples were ever built, and this remained the only Class 8 in existence. The locomotive was saved from scrap though, and it's subsequently been modified to be far more efficient, and ironically it's now one of the most efficient and powerful locomotives to run in Britain. So there you have it, Duke of Gloucester up close and personal. And this class has the best track record of all the standards in terms of preservation, because obviously 100% of this class was preserved. Cheating slightly, obviously, because there was only one, but still a good record. And this model really isn't the greatest. It was brought out during Hornby's design clever phase, which means that a lot of that beautiful pipework is just a part of the moulding, and they haven't even picked it out on this one. So it's a pretty basic model, but it's also the only model of this class that's been produced. So if you are interested in completing your collection of standards, this thing is going to be your only option. And while up close it doesn't look great, from a distance and while it's up and running, it's absolutely fine. And this one's got the digital sound on it as well. So I guess we should go and take this for a spin. So since this loco is an 8P and not an 8MT, I thought it better have passenger coaches. And British Railways liked two different liveries when it came to passenger coaches. Blood and custard, as we've already seen, and the other was chocolate and cream. So I thought we'd better do those. So there you have it, Duke of Gloucester, the Class 8, with a big long train this time of passenger coaches, as we're getting up towards now the very most powerful of the BR standards. And now then we come to the final of the standards. And not only is this the final of the standards, but it's also the final steam locomotive ever to be built under British Railways. It is of course this, the BR Standard Class 9F. And again with these we've got a choice between Hornby and Bachmann. This is the Hornby version, which is newer, and it's also a lot more detailed, it's got a better quality mechanism, and it's got a lot more features as well. Again, this is quite a lot different from the Pacifics that came before it, obviously with this 210 wheel configuration. These were the ultimate development in freight locomotives, and they were extremely fast and powerful with an impressive 10 small driving wheels. A mighty 251 were produced in total, making them, by my count, the most numerous of the BR standards. They were also the only BR standard to be designated for freight only, the others being mixed traffic, the exception being the Duke of Gloucester, which only did passenger work. Only one 9F was known for doing passenger work, and that was Evening Star, the final one built, and this was painted into BR green for these duties, while the rest of the class, generally speaking, remained in BR black, at least during their BR service lives. Ultimately, withdrawal took place between 1964 and 1968, but a very healthy 9 have been preserved. And here's a close look for you. This is indeed Evening Star, so the final loco to be produced of the class, and also a very fitting name, I think, for the end of steam, effectively. And I think this model, together with the 2MT, really, is probably the finest of the standards. It's brand new, Hornby only released this a couple of years ago, and everything about it is just beautiful. It's so well painted, the detail is top notch. Not that impressed by the performance of this initially, but I was able to improve it with a new motor. So there you have it, the final of the standards, and also the final example of the final class of standards. The very last loco to be produced by British Railways. So let's get this running. This is the passenger version of the 9F, the only one, so it's only fitting that this should haul passengers. And there you have it, the iconic 9F Evening Star hauling some Pullmans, as though it's hauling a sort of special excursion or something like that. And I understand it did a fair bit of that under preservation. Now, these days it's not running anymore, and in fact last time I saw it, I'm pretty sure it had its boiler cut open at the NRM so that you could see inside. What that means for the future of the loco, I'm not sure, but most likely the boiler ticket would have expired and it would need a new boiler anyway. So no more Evening Star in real life, but we can at least enjoy these models. So that's it, Evening Star with some Pullmans. So there you have it, those are the BR standard locos that are available in 00 scale. And these models are fun to look at, but ultimately the story of the BR standards is quite a sad one. Because if you were paying attention to the dates throughout this video, you'll have noticed that none of these lasted very long. In fact, a BR standard was quite lucky if it made it beyond 10 years. And this was because shortly after introducing these BR standards, British Railways decided that actually steam wasn't the way forward after all, and they decided to try and replace their steam locos with diesels. And this took a long while, it took like a decade or so, but by the end of the 1960s, all of their steam locos had been withdrawn and replaced by diesels, which is a huge waste really. All of these beautiful locos, designed carefully and almost 1,000 built in total, to serve for just over 10 years in most cases before being scrapped. You might even say they'd have been better off not to have bothered and just gone straight for diesels, but then again, we wouldn't have had the standards, so I'm glad that they did it. Anyway, what do you think about the BR standards? Which one is your favourite? And which of the BR standards that hasn't been modelled in 00 yet would you like to see? And also, are there any BR standards that you think need a new model? Some of these are getting a little bit old now. But for now, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, cheers everybody, you take care.